Just in case you needed one more piece of evidence before concluding that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government are highly authoritarian, here comes Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan with a borderline fascist Labour policy trying to cram down state and trade unionist interests on private businesses by stating that they cannot hire replacement workers during union strikes. Yes, if you are a private business and you had unionized labor, you let a labor union take up your labor needs. They were the ones providing workers, and they strike. You are now no longer allowed to hire different workers. And this is effectively the government and unions basically taking over your company. They always win strikes because you are not allowed to replace them, so they can stay off work as long as they want. And unless you're going to wait them out for 6, 7, 8 months in which you might go bankrupt before they do, you are pretty much forced to actually bend to their demands. Absolutely insane. And when I say this is a borderline fascist policy, I mean that in the literal way, not the pejorative way. Fascism means trade unionism. The Italians called their unions fascio, just as the French called their unions syndicates, which is why it's either called trade unionism or syndicalism. And what the government right now is doing is increasing trade union power so that unions have far, far more say over how you run your own company, which is how the fascist Italian economy was organized in the 20s and 30s, that everything was dictated by government officials and trade union representatives to set targets, labor quotas, and all these other things for different sectors of the economy in different regions. This is literally how the economy was run. I know fascist is just used as a term that means bad by socialists who mostly agree with a lot of fascist policy. They just don't think that they do. But this is what fascism actually is. It is trade unionism. It is government and trade union combined power in order to get rid of private property and basically operate other people's businesses for them. And if they resist, it just becomes a state corporation. Anyways, I want to read you some of the text here from Seamus O'Regan's announcement that came out last year in November. I just frankly didn't notice it up until now, and I noticed it because other journalists only started to notice what was going on. So here we go. It says, the government of Canada believes in free and fair collective bargaining. Who's going to bet that that's basically proven wrong in line 2 or by paragraph 2? The use of replacement workers can distract from negotiations. It can prolong disputes, and it can damage labor relations for years to come. No, it actually doesn't prolong labor disputes. It actually ends them once a labor union potentially gets too unreasonable with its demands. That if they are asking for a 30% increase in wages and you can't pay that, well, why should you have to hire that trade union to provide your labor for you? You should be able to hire outside people if you want. That is what a free market is all about. Anyways, to read on, it says, today, Minister of Labour Seamus O'Regan Jr. introduced legislation which proposed to ban the use of replacement workers in federally regulated workplaces during a strike or lockout. The legislation would also make important changes to improving the maintenance of activity processes. Bill C-58 would ban employers from using replacement workers to do the work of unionized employees who are on strike or locked out. An exemption would apply in situations where there are threats to health and safety or threats of serious property and environmental damage that could not be managed by the employer's existing workforce. If a union believes the employer is using replacement workers in capacity beyond this exemption, the resources would be to file a complaint with Canada Industrial Relations Board, who would investigate the issue. This is absolutely insane. This is basically just saying in any strike dispute in the private sector, if this passes, the union just wins. The union just wins. They win because you can't actually fight back. You have no ability to walk away from the table and say your terms are unreasonable and I'm going to hire other workers. The whole promise of private sector unions, public sector unions have been a disaster for years. But the whole idea of private sector unions, which have always been better over time, was that it was going to be a small union or maybe even a large union of many workers who, through their skill, would basically collectively bargain so that all four of them would get a good deal from a private company. And a private company could be happy that even though they're paying for higher wages, they get a set of 40 really good workers in the particular trade that the industry is in. That's a fine deal. The union can negotiate, and they have a lot of power to negotiate by saying that all 40 of these workers will work for you if you sign this agreement. If not, we will go somewhere else. This is basically saying that if you've ever signed an agreement or if your industry is required to use some unionized labor, you can now never actually win a dispute because you can never hire non-union workers to replace them. That is absolutely nuts. That is basically the government worming their way into private business and then basically just acting like the neutral moderator, just saying, well, we need to get this contract negotiation done. Also, you basically have to say yes. That is the government and trade unions combining their interest in order to cram down on private businesses and run private businesses the way that they want. The government, through this, could easily increase private sector union wages by incentivizing these strikes, and then also come through and, through partnerships with trade unions, push any of their other government mandates onto businesses by including that in trade union contract negotiations. This is absolutely insane. This is no longer free market if this passes, if you have unionized labor. This is fascist economics. It is trade unionist economics. Each sector is basically going to be run by the government and trade unions that occupy them, and private business owners pretty much just get to select the color of the product. That's pretty much it. Not like, and this is why I think that previously, in previous years, the Liberal government has been a big, bloated corporate government. It has played to a lot of interests of specific groups. It has, passed a lot of regulations to do so, increased taxes so that they can, redistribute wealth to benefit certain groups that they're looking for votes from and whatnot. But this is just flat out saying that, yeah, if you're a private business owner, you lose. The trade union that you have gotten labor from, they now basically own most of your business through proxy of being your mandated labor provider. They now get to choose whether the factory functions or not, whether your private business functions or not, whether you're in heavy industry or you're in the service industry. Your employees can now just shut you down. And if you have any limited amount of non-union labor, well, they're not allowed to exactly fill in those gaps, because they're not allowed to be those union jobs cannot be replaced by even pre-existing non-union labor. So even if you had a manager who wasn't a union labor, it wasn't part of a union, they can't take over that union position, because that would be now a replacement worker. Nuts. This is what actual fascism is. Trade unionism. It's not just general authoritarianism. It's not right-wing, authoritarianism. Fascism is a left-wing ideology. Fascism, National Socialism, Soviet-style communism, Maoism, they're all socialist totalitarian ideologies, because it is the government taking control over every aspect of your life. That's always the ridiculous thing whenever people claim, the Nazis and Italian fascists, they were far-right capitalists. I'm like, how can you be a capitalist if you literally are a totalitarian who controls all aspects of life? That doesn't make any sense. You're not a totalitarian if you do not control the economy, which the Nazis and fascists fully did. In Germany, which National Socialists and fascists are still a little bit different from each other, but in Germany, they would set prices for things. You would have to get permission from the government to buy certain quantities of materials to make products. Those products would be price fixed. You had to use a certain set amount of labor to create those products. It was not a capitalist economy, but there's this stupid lie that goes around there that any ideology that obviously makes the left look bad becomes right-wing. So tons of things are just suddenly right-wing because it made socialism look bad. Funnily enough, the nutcases will still claim Soviet-style socialism as a left-wing ideology because they still like that. But they'll still then claim, if you actually push them hard enough, well, Stalin was actually secretly right-wing, because everything that's not good on the left is now right, even though the right always implies less government control, smaller C kind of conservatism, not literal authoritarian cram-downs on the public or private business. One of the first things the Nazis did when they took over in 1933, when they were elected, because not all authoritarianism comes through revolution. Sometimes it literally comes through elections, although then they banned elections. One of the first things that they did was ban private property. They removed private property as a guaranteed right. Basically, you were only entitled to your property if it was being used for the pleasure of the state, which means that you don't own your property. Because if you were not using it for specific state interests, then you didn't get it. Even in the Soviet Union, you could own certain things, but as soon as it became a commodity that was not benefiting the state, it became the state's. Ugh. Anyways, super annoying. The Liberals are absolutely crazy and authoritarian. And I just want to quickly mention, Wyatt Claypool, am running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. If you live in this riding, check out my website in the description below, wyattclaypool.com. I'll just quickly show the riding map on the screen. And then also I have in the description below also my legal fund for myself and the National Telegraph. We have this ridiculous defamation suit coming from some rich developer who can't actually prove any defamation, but is just hoping to grind us down through legal costs. Never even submitted any evidence that we defamed him. Our guest writer who mentioned him in an article about Aaron O'Toole based out the entire section about him off of a Globe and Mail report that was deeply fact-checked and is still up online today because it was good reporting. And we based our entire report, the section about this guy, on that Globe and Mail report and other resources, and somehow we get sued even though, one, we're accurate, and two, we weren't even the first people to even make these actual substantive evidenced claims. Anyways, that should be it for me today, finally. This video was kind of something that was eventually going to come anyways. I hate the stupid left-wing propaganda point that, well, the National Socialists just put socialism in their title because they were actually trying to trick voters into voting for them. No, they were actual socialists. There's a reason why Nazi economic influencers wrote books like Das Ende des Kapitalismus. It's because they hate capitalism, because they're anti-Semitic, and they believe capitalism and Marxist socialism were Jewish. That's why they came up with their own version of socialism, National Socialism. Don't buy these stupid left-wing lies that fascism and Nazism are right-wing. They aren't. I'm on a conservative. I am on the right because I am anti-Nazi and anti-communist. I am anti-state control of the economy, state control of social life, private life, all this stuff. That is what makes me a capitalist conservative. And I think you should be too, and I guarantee most of you are. Anyways, that should be it for me today. Finally, see you guys later.